Hello, welcome to Flash, the series where I talk about games I've been playing recently. And today, that game is Vellum. Finally, after reviewing so many, and I say this with nothing but love in my heart, dirt boy grime slime sludge games, splashing around in the mud like some sort of cave baby who's never seen the sun, I'm finally reviewing a game that has colors that are not in some sort of shade of muted brown or green. A few weeks ago, I wanted to play a multiplayer game that didn't require me to use any higher brain functions, and I stumbled upon Vellum, which had recently escaped early access hell and entered into 1.0. Vellum is a third-person horde shooter with roguelike elements, where you play as a sentient fountain pen, spraying your ink at non-consenting ghouls and goblins, and if you're doing it right, you're spraying that ink damn near everywhere. The entire game is book-themed, starting at your pensona and continuing into every other facet of the game. Now, as a book-themed game, semi-mindless horde shooter or otherwise, it has a story of sorts, which, unfortunately for me, is scattered throughout the game in little scrolls of vaguely poetic messages from the personas of the past. I'm a natural-born lore avoider, as some of you might know. I'll skip cutscenes and dialogue boxes until I'm 6 feet underground, and random lore books sitting around are doomed to collect dust like that one copy of Dune you purchased 5 years ago and are totally planning to get around to one of these days. While this didn't affect my enjoyment of the game in any way, unfortunately for me, the story does pretty much inform everything about the game and gives it a purpose if you can believe it. So I will try and explain to you the story as I understand it with my limited exposure. And maybe I'm going to be way off, but you're just gonna have to live with it, I'm afraid. You are some sort of pen-headed wizard who resides within a large, endless library with a sacred duty to protect the font, the source of all ink in the world. Ink being almost like the source of all magic, I think. In the beginning of the game, you arrive at the library after it's been abandoned, and at risk of succumbing to some mysterious evil entity, the Torn, which are the ghoulies and goblins I mentioned earlier. In the tutorial, they're explained as essentially magic bookworms trying to eat away at the pages of all the books in the big library, but you quickly realize they're not just bookworms. Sometimes the Torn are the ghost of King Tut, or the giant death snake of King Tut. These Torn used to be harmless, but the previous custodians of the library got a little too swept up in their diva ex-reader fan fictions and went a little crazy, empowering the Torn into a force to be reckoned with. You're tasked via sticky note by someone named Prism to help fend off the tides of Torn, mend the ancient, powerful tomes of the library, and eventually defeat the fan fiction crazed former guardians, all while using an ink-fueled arsenal of spells. That brings me to the gameplay. You have 4 abilities: your generator, your spender, and mobility spells, which are universal, and your signature, which is determined by your ink color. Each of these can be swapped out for different powers of various damage types and ranges. My favorite being the clatter, where you throw a 20-sided dice at your enemy and do damage based on the number you roll. I like this one because I'm delusional, and I believe I can never be punished, even when I roll 3 ones in a row. Something I find pleasing about each ability is that they all feel evenly applicable. Usually these sort of games have builds and limitations that force a player to adapt to some sort of meta, but I'm a freak, and I naturally lean towards the most unviable solution presented in a video game, because what if being strapped into those medieval stretchers feels really good for the first few seconds? The gameplay loop is simple. You explore different books or levels, defeating waves of enemies and gaining scrolls that augment your moveset as you play through each wave, inevitably leading to a final boss. While the arenas you fight these enemies in are highly limited, and I found myself in the same level over and over again no matter what book I was in, Vellum still keeps it interesting by implementing a gimmick that comes with each story. For example, the first book of Scribes and Torn has a system that between each level you can unlock boons that affect the font that you spawn at, like damage reduction or the occasional mortar strike. And so I found even though it was frustrating to play on the same rotation of maybe 10 levels over and over again, the gimmicks that came with each book were enough for me to stay entertained and engaged through my completion of the game so far. Vellum has just left early access and entered 1.0, and this is my first experience with the game, so I'm unsure what features are new or old. But in addition to the wave defense levels, as you play through the game, you unlock a rift-like area where you can participate in boss rush-like raids to defeat the now corrupted former library custodians. Now this right here was what pushed this game into the spotlight for me. These boss fights are hard. Other than being given random upgrades at the beginning of each fight, you know nothing else about what you're going into until after your first death, in which which then a tip book appears before each fight. Each boss you fight, while unforgiving, have strategies that remind me of modern MMO raid bosses you'd see in Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft. On top of being a precise and fast-paced bullet hell, you're also expected to do light strategic puzzle solving between an onslaught of heavy, endless artillery. An example being, without getting too deep into the content, the first boss of the Gray Area raid, a spider-like boss that launches eggs around the arena. That if you don't open them prematurely to destroy the spiders it spawns, the boss will empower them upon hatching, and at that point they become near impossible to dodge. While I enjoyed the regular levels of this game, I never felt I needed to pay much attention to spacing and timing. I usually got away with constantly moving and holding left click. These raids forced me to consider how I approached the game, and it felt as though I was getting onto a brand new experience, and was very satisfied when I was finally able to solve each boss. I was really hoping to finish the game off before this review, but it seemed even though it's left early access, the final raid of the 3 presented will not be out until 1.1, which I can't be too mad at, but in the perpetual early access gaming world we live in, I feel as though when a game finally leaves it, it should be feature complete. But I also understand that complaint may be driving mainly by my desire to have more game to play. And for $20 USD, maybe I'm getting a little too greedy. Overall, Vellum is a fantastic, relatively short and snappy horde shooter roguelite, and I highly recommend you give it a try. It's great solo or with friends. I give Vellum an A. Cohesive theme and design, easy to get into, and fun to master gameplay. And while I'm frustrated that I'm one boss fight away from completing it, for the genre Vellum falls under, being able to linearly complete it does not necessarily affect its quality. It was 30% off Steam at the time of my purchase, though I doubt that sale is still on by the release of this video. $20 is a more than agreeable price for what you get. That's it for me. Have a good one.